For this next example, again, we do have one fraction equals another fraction, so we're still going to be using the method called cross multiply. But rather than finding the solution and then checking to see if what values of x make the denominators 0, I'm going to actually do those two inequalities first. So I'm going to say, well, 2x minus 3 cannot equal 0, and x plus 11 cannot equal 0. And then I'll solve those. So this first one, we'd add 3 and then divide by 2, so we get x cannot be 3 halves. The second one, we would subtract 11, so we get x cannot equal negative 11. So if I solve this and I get an answer that is one of those disallowed values, then I would discard it and say that that's not actually part of my solution. All right, here we go. Cross multiplying now. So I'm going to take the first numerator and multiply it by the second denominator. So x times x plus 11. And then the second numerator times the first denominator. So 3x times 2x minus 3. And now I need to get rid of those extra parentheses that are in there. So I'm going to distribute the x on the left, and I'll distribute the 3x on the right. Okay, so this time I ended up with a quadratic equation. It has an x squared in it, so degree 2 equation. So my strategy for solving it is a little bit different than it would have been for a linear. Instead of trying to gather the x's on one side of the equation and the constants on the other, I need to move everything to one side of the equation and create a 0 on the other. And then my first strategy for trying to solve it would be factoring. So because my coefficient of x squared on the right-hand side is positive and is already greater than the one on the left, I'm going to create my 0 on the left-hand side because I like my x squared to be positive. So I'm going to do that by subtracting x squared once from each side of the equation. So that would give me 5x squared over here. And to turn that 11x into a 0, I'd be subtracting 11x from each side of the equation. So negative 9x minus 11x would be minus 20x. And now I do have this quadratic equation here. I can factor it by taking out the greatest common factor, which would be 5x. So it would be 5x times, the other factor would be x minus 4. Now that I have it factored and set equal to 0, I can set each of those factors equal to 0 to solve. So I get 5x equals 0 and x minus 4 equals 0. For that first one to solve it, I'm dividing both sides by 5. 0 divided by 5 is just 0. And on the second one, I'm adding 4 to both sides, so x is equal to 4. Right, now before I present my answer, I want to check each of these solutions against the values of x that I said were restricted, things that x is not allowed to be. Neither one of these, 0 and 4, appear on that list of numbers that x is not allowed to be, so these are both good solutions. So I'm going to list them both. I'm going to say x equals, and then I'll list them in order from least to greatest, because that's just good form. So I'll say x equals 0, 4. Now you try one.